Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 161 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike, that is Gavin and Thea. And Gavin, have you ever had anything go wrong in your life?
Oh, it seems like constantly. But what I think Mike is referring to is the thing that I was doing just literal seconds before we started recording.
Yep.
My house, which I'm lucky that I own a home. I want to preface this first. A lot of people are not in a position to buy houses right now, and I'm very fortunate. With that said, whoever did a lot of the work in this house is not good at their job. So, and this might just be a Pennsylvania thing, but it seems like we lose power very frequently. Like if there's even like moderately strong winds, the power will go off for a few seconds at a time. And that's just a thing that happens. And like I'm from northern New York, I'm from a very snowy place where like you have to be, especially in the winter, you have to be prepared to potentially be without power for days. So like, that's not new to me. But it is June. So I don't think about that. And I am prepared if I lose power for days at a time. We have a generator. But it is just really annoying when I lose power for little bits at a time. Potentially because that can do stuff to your electronics. And I got home.
What electronics in particular?
My washing machine. Thank you for asking. We apparently lost power at some point today, and since then, our washing machine just decided to stop working. Yeah, so that's what I was dealing with right before we started recording. Yep, no matter what you do to it, it tries to pump water, and I know the water's on and working, and the faucets and stuff are working. It tries to pump water, and it just can't. And even when you try to cancel it, it'll stop trying for about 10 seconds and then start trying again, even though you don't do anything else. Yeah, so maybe the power going out fried my washing machine. That's not even 2 years old. Love that for me. But anyway, we're here to talk about potatoes.
Ooh.
Potatoes.
Yes, and this is actually an idea from Mike because...
I was going to say, I thought that I remembered suggesting something this weekend because we were actually hanging out this past weekend. I have no memory of what I said.
Oh, no.
But...
yeah, so we'll talk in detail about a specific kind of potatoes. But before we get into that, let's do some housekeeping. Fia, go ahead and kick us off.
Yes, of course. So don't forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on, and to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to give us feedback about the show and any future topics you would like to hear on the pod. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, be sure to fill out the guest form. All of that stuff can be found in the show notes. Any idea what next episode topic's going to be, Gavin?
Yeah, so it was going to be this episode, but we're all real busy right now. And so it was suggested that we do a shorter one, and I thought that sounded great. So next week we're going to be talking about brains, which obviously is a very complicated topic. And not one that I only want to do in half an hour or however long this episode's going to end up being. So, yeah, brains, big old complicated thing inside your noggin, is going to be next episode.
Cool.
Yeah.
This house is better kept than your house right now, Gavin.
Yeah, it sure is. Sure is. With that, Mike, do you have a today in history for us, or are you Googling currently?
Okay, first off, I Google when we start recording the podcast. I've got several answers right now that I'm choosing from.
All right.
So, let's go with, we're going to keep this simple. I teach American history. Everybody talks about July 4th, Declaration of Independence, and, yeah. But on June 11th, 1776, the Continental Congress creates the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. There were 5 people included on this committee. Can you name any of the 5 people?
Not a woman.
Correct.
Correct.
I don't know. I'd say probably Thomas Jefferson.
That's 1. That's the obvious one.
George
Benjamin
Washington.
Franklin.
Not Washington. Benjamin Franklin's 2.
Okay. Madison.
Not Madison. There's one other guy that you might get and 2 others you probably won't.
Governor Morris.
No, not Governor Morris, although I love that man.
No,
Hamilton.
I don't know.
So we've got John Adams is the other one that you might know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
As well as Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston.
I've definitely heard of Livingston, but I would never in a million years guess him.
Yeah, I believe, if my memory serves me right, he was part of the guy that winds up doing the Louisiana Purchase.
I think so.
Yes. So, yeah, that is today in history, June 11th. As Gavin mentioned before, we are all in a little bit of a time crunch. We're going for a short episode here. So, I'm done with my thing. I believe we have Seagrass Corner.
Oh, yeah. So over
Here
here,
we go.
Seagrass Corner, I want to talk about an amphipod. Specifically, one amphipod called Amphiliska abdita. It
not
is
real.
a tube-building amphipod that's native to the western Atlantic, extending from Maine to Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. But it has been introduced to California, where it was first reported in 1954. This tube-dwelling amphipod inhabits soft sediments and can also be in seagrasses and oyster reefs too. And there are some studies that say in the San Francisco Bay that these amphipods might compete with bivalve species for resources such as space and food. And that's because the Amphiliska abdita, they make these little pocket-shaped tubes made from fine sediment, so they basically like cocoon themselves into some mud.
Okay.
And then they lie on their back, and at the top of the tube, they filter water with their appendages, and so they're suspension feeders, and they feed on detritus and phytoplankton, just like bivalves do, and they are eaten by fish. And then, fun fact, because I have to identify these species for my dissertation, you can easily identify this amphipod because they have 2 pairs of eyes. So they have 4 eyeballs.
Oh.
Wild.
Yeah.
Also,
Gavin, quick, how many animals have 4 eyes?
Not that many, to be honest. Four's kind of a weird number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's either
but
like
yeah,
2 or a lot.
Yeah. So amphipods, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're a crustacean, yeah?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They're
Okay.
a tiny little bug.
Yeah, so they are like, most of them I think are, pelagic, so they just kind of float around and do stuff. They're not like all that great swimmers, from my understanding. They just kind of drift around, a lot of them,
Yeah.
or... Yeah, so when we talked about crustaceans and like isopods a couple episodes ago, I didn't mention amphipods. They're really important in their ecosystems, but they're kind of weird, so I didn't feel like they were important.
Yeah.
And let this be a lesson. If you're weird, you're not important.
That is correct. Anywho, speaking of weird, something that I learned when I was in college that was weird were salt potatoes. And that's what we call a segue.
Let's do it.
So
let's segue it off. Let's do some salt potato segue.
Yeah, so like I said, a couple minutes ago, this was going to be a different episode, but we're real busy, so I decided, based on some advice from Mike, because Mike and I saw each other at a wedding this past weekend, and something that was served at this wedding were salt potatoes. Or at least it was brought up in discussion. Actually, now that I think about it, were there salt potatoes at the wedding, or was that just something we talked about?
I don't remember. I didn't get whatever the potato dish was.
Gotcha.
But let's just say that they were.
Sure.
Because who's fact checking us?
Exactly.
Who's listening?
Yeah. But yeah, salt potatoes, for anyone not familiar, are a food that is like region specific to central New York.
Hell yeah.
And so I decided to plan this sort of shorter episode about how you think about sort of your local regional foods and how they are almost certainly highly influenced by your local geology and geography, using the salt potato as an example. So, let's talk about it. What are salt potatoes? Or if you Google them, you will see everyone online who's not actually from Central New York call them Syracuse salt potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yep.
In fact, well, actually, you're probably going to get there, so I won't even spoil the Syracuse salt potatoes line.
Yeah. And so I'm actually going to go into like a decent amount of like local history. So Mike, feel free to chime in at any point here because you're the one who's actually from Syracuse.
I'm ready to embarrass myself with my lack of knowledge here, but if I can help you out, I will.
But yeah, salt potatoes themselves are like one of the most straightforward like regional foods that you can possibly think of. It's basically just extremely salty potatoes. You boil like small potatoes, like maybe a little bit bigger than golf ball sized, in extremely briny water. Many grocery stores in central New York will sell sacks of these potatoes with a 1 pound bag of salt in the sack to use for this purpose.
Wow. A lot of salt.
A lot of salt. And so you boil them, you make a big salty mess all over your stove because the water boils over and dries and leaves behind like the white salt crystals. Or often make a big mess on the side burner of your grill, since these are very popular summertime like grilling food. Then you slather the potatoes in butter, salted butter preferred, of course. And then you can eat them whole because they're small enough to fit in your mouth, or you can, served cut in half or mashed, whatever. And this might sound like too much salt, because medically it is, but man, is it delicious.
Yes.
I'm gonna push back and just say they're good. Delicious. I don't know. I'm not thrilled with like.
I think they just hit different, personally.
I agree they hit different. Like, I'll take a salt potato over like a baked potato any day of the week.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that the place I'm from had a better regional specific dish. Partially because I'm not sure what restaurant you can go to order salt potatoes. Because it's not like they get served like really anywhere around here. It's something that it's made at home.
Yeah, I bet there are some like mom and pop type places like you'd never see them at a. Actually, I'd be surprised if like Dinosaur Barbecue didn't have salt potatoes.
Ooh, that's a good one. Dinosaur might have some.
That's the only place that
famous
like
barbecue
comes to
place
mind
here in Syracuse.
Yeah, that's the only place that comes to mind that would like have them on a menu.
That one or like Limp Lizard or something. Let's see. Yeah, we're gonna take a look. But yeah, it's the Syracuse dish.
I'm really hungry now.
I know, me too. But yeah, so while Mike looks that up a little bit, so this is a food that I grew up with, and presumably Mike and Fia did too.
Yes.
And it was not until I got to college that I realized that this was not a thing everywhere. Even like close everywhere. So like where I went to college was a bit south of Syracuse, but I'd say like at least 65% of the students at this college were from the greater New York City area. So like Hudson Valley, New York City, Long Island. And they had never heard of salt potatoes. And when you describe them, if you're not used to it, that sounds like that is going to clog your arteries the second you look at it.
Yeah, well,
I bet there's a lot of people in central New York with coronary heart disease, and or kidney problems. But anyway, as I took more geology classes in college, I started to kind of understand why no one, like I said, even from just a couple hours downstate, had ever heard of them. And that's because of the sort of unique geology and history of the Syracuse area. And so, Syracuse was initially built off of its salt production industry. These days, this is a very much like a 21st century problem, and probably even like mid 20th century problem. But like salt is just readily available all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That has absolutely not been the case for like most of human history.
Salt, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the reason why salt was so valuable for so long is that it's pretty good for preserving food when you don't have refrigeration around.
Yes. That is a big part of most of like the one that comes to mind is I forget what it was called, but the empire that Mansa Musa led in Africa. Mansa Musa is like most people consider him to be the wealthiest person in human history. Even considering how many billions of dollars that Elon Musk, for example, has today, Mansa Musa was richer than him, and it's kind of not all that close. And he made all that money in his empire by trading gold and salt. Because salt was just that important. And even just like biologically, salt is incredibly important. And it's actually in my notes that I started taking for the brains episode. We need salt to function. These days, we probably eat too much salt. But like, there's a reason why salt licks exist for like farm animals. And why farm animals will just sit there and like demolish a salt lick, because our bodies are programmed to really want salt, because we don't know when the next time we're going to find a good source of salt is, and our bodies, like our neurons, need that to function.
This is part of like if you are dehydrated from doing whatever particular activity the night before.
Mm-hmm.
While you're drinking like one of the liquid IVs or one of the various other brands, helps you out. It's mostly just like salt and water,
Yep.
To help replenish your electrolytes.
Yeah. And so, salt just in human history has been extremely important. And Syracuse was built off of this industry of producing salt. There are natural springs around Onondaga Lake, which is a decent sized lake, sort of just right around Syracuse. That these natural springs come up on like the south side of the lake, and they are incredibly briny and like very salt rich. And that water can be harvested and used to produce table salt. And for much of Syracuse's history, most of the salt used in North America came from Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so that built Syracuse into a major hub for trade, and especially once the Erie Canal was built, which runs right through Syracuse. And so I'm not sure how much people outside of New York learn about the Erie Canal, but it was a big part of like elementary education in New York State, at least. I remember singing the song about it. But for anyone who's not, familiar with the Erie Canal, it was a canalway that connected the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, to New York City. So it kind of just cuts straight across New York State from Lake Erie to the Hudson River. Before this canal, for like a ship from New York City to get to the Great Lakes, they would have to sail all the way north, up, through Canada, up into Hudson Bay, and then down the St. Lawrence River. To get from New York City to Buffalo on a boat, it would be about 2,000 miles of sea travel. Once the Erie Canal connected them, that same trip from New York to Buffalo was only 400 miles. And you can't fit, a giant sailing ship through the Erie Canal.
No, you cannot.
But you sure can fit a lot of rafts and like barges is usually how that shipping went. And even though you're not shipping as large of a quantity, you're cutting the trip literally by 80%. So that just made it so much more economical and efficient to transport goods from New York Harbor to elsewhere in the Great Lakes region, like Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Toronto, and even places that like aren't right on the lakes, like Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. Those places just got like so much more connected to the East Coast. And so because of this, this new basically 1800s version of a super highway that ran right through the city, the salt industry really opened up in Syracuse, because this was also the time when, the United States was expanding westward. And now that Syracuse was better able to access the Great Lakes and ship all this salt further west as, America spread west, the salt industry like exploded and made Syracuse into like a place. Because before that, it was just kind of some like a relatively small city, not even a city really. But I saw just on the Wikipedia page, it went from like 250 people in like 1820 to over 22,000 people by 1850.
Wow.
So, and that was when the Erie Canal was built. So, salt is the reason Syracuse as a city like exists.
There's even a very, very small salt museum that you can go to in Liverpool, just outside of Syracuse.
There sure is. And that gives Syracuse, most cities have like their name or like a moniker. Syracuse is the Salt City. And so because of that, Syracuse has always kind of been sort of like the hub for central New York. It is like the only decent sized airport in central New York. It is like the only like shopping center. The mall in Syracuse is one of like the top 10 biggest malls in the United States, I think. I don't know if it...
Yeah, I think it's like number 6 or something. I'll have
Yeah.
to double check that. By the way, as I was looking here, could not find salt potatoes at Limp Lizard at Dinosaur Barbecue.
Huh.
Looked online, almost every place is like, yeah, you're going to find this in someone's backyard served in a Dixie bowl.
Gotcha.
You can get loaded salt potatoes at a restaurant called Bull and Bear. It looks like there's like some pulled pork or something thrown on top of here.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
It does. So, Bull and Bear has them, but they are rare to find in restaurants. This is definitely an at-home delicacy.
Yeah. And so, because of Syracuse's sort of role as this like hub in all of central New York, salt itself just became like a major part of basically everyone's life and culture in central New York. And so now, with that background, on to the geology here, unless Mike, you had anything you wanted to add on sort of the history bit of it.
I think you're kind of nailing it right now, at least up to my knowledge.
Cool. So yeah, all of that salt comes from a geologic formation called the Salina Group. There's a lot of various places around Syracuse named Salina. And for example, the city of Syracuse, when it was initially formed as a city, there was originally the town of Syracuse and the town of Salina that merged when they were like, hey, we probably need a post office here. Merged to form the city of Syracuse. So there's lots of like, there's like Salina Street, lots of other places just around called Salina. And it's named that because of the salt, like saline.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. It's like, that is part of the reason. It's also, they named it Syracuse to begin with, like that original like town, after Syracuse, the city on Sicily in Italy, because of like similar things. There's also a fairly large like salt industry on Sicily, because, Mediterranean, it's salty and also like fairly hot. So the, salty water evaporates quickly. There, you can get, Mediterranean salt, like there's a lot of different places for it. So they called it that. They called it Syracuse because of the salt production and also this nearby sort of town of Salina. But yeah, so this formation was deposited way back in the Silurian period. We talked about the Silurian period a lot way back in episode 66. So listen to that for more on the period as a whole. But the Silurian is kind of a weird period compared to some of the others around it. Yeah, so for a little background, the Silurian period is like pretty early in like the history of like complex life. So it's from 443 to about 419 million years ago. But compared to some of the other ones around it in that sort of those early days, it is, comparatively, pretty short. It's only about 23 million years long, compared to the Devonian period, which is like 52 million years. The Ordovician period, that's 44 million years. The Devonian period, right after the Silurian, is about 84 million years. So it is about half as long as its neighbors in the same like time these periods around it.
Mm-hmm.
So being shorter just inherently means that there are fewer rocks from this time. There's just less time for sediment to accumulate to then make rocks. And also, as I mentioned, it's fairly old, which just means that there's been more time for those already fewer rocks to have been destroyed by the various processes that Earth has to recycle rocks. And so with those two things combined, we just don't have a lot of Silurian-aged rocks left around today. Like, we have them. In some places, they're really good, but there's not a lot of them. One of those places where we have really good Silurian-aged rocks is central and western New York. And so the salt in the Salina group isn't just in central New York, though. This formation is also found in Ohio and Michigan, where it was also mined for salt, including, before the United States got there. It has, there's records of various Native American peoples using this area for salt for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so this particular formation has so much salt and other evaporite minerals like anhydrite and gypsum, because in the Silurian, this area was like a shallow sea, kind of like the Mediterranean today. And around the time when these rocks were deposited, sea levels were like rising and falling quite fast, in geologic terms anyway. And so when the sea was low, it would leave behind large swaths of environment that were basically just like dried out lake beds. And so all of the minerals that are normally dissolved in the ocean, like salt and gypsum, would just be left behind. All the water would dry out and these minerals would form. Then the sea levels would rise and cover those minerals up with layers of, shale and limestone, and so on and so forth for, many rise and fall cycles. And so, long story short, because sea levels were incredibly variable 420 million years ago, people in central New York eat very salty potatoes during summer cookouts today.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it is a fun part. It's a nice way to know that you're in Syracuse. I had a similar experience to Gavin, just slowly finding out that, salt potatoes aren't a normal thing.
Yeah.
Two other quick notes here. Number one, Gavin, you actually hit it dead on. Syracuse, Destiny USA, is the exactly 10th largest ball in America, according to Wikipedia.
Heck yeah.
And I would be shunned for not mentioning, when we're talking about salt potatoes in restaurants, you can get salt potato pizza at a place called Toss and Fire. I know that doesn't sound great.
I bet it's actually pretty good.
No, that sounds amazing.
I'm begging you to try it. It's a place called Toss and Fire. They're at the New York State Fair. They have a couple actual locations. Get the salt potato pizza. It really is good.
Yeah, and so this whole idea, sort of in closing here, can definitely be applied to some other like famous regional foods, particularly those regarding certain like local plants that can be impacted in various ways by soil conditions, which are obviously like heavily impacted by what kinds of rocks are there, or breads that are impacted by minerals in the groundwater that's used to make the bread. Anybody who has ever talked to somebody from New York City knows that they don't shut up about how good the bagels there are. Correctly.
And they're not wrong.
Correctly. And if you ask them why, almost always they will say it's the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about the water. I didn't really look into it. But that's I've heard that about the pizza in New York City as well, like with the crust. And so, this obviously also applies super heavily, and I was thinking about, the places Fia has lived to sort of tie this into. Applies really heavily to any like coastal seafoods, since like the local abiotic conditions of the water are a large part of why there are shrimp in the Gulf of Mexico, or not that Fia has lived here, but like crabs in the Chesapeake Bay, to begin with. So the reason that these places are such good fisheries for these, seafoods that they have become famous for, is a lot due to these abiotic factors. And so the next time you have one of your favorite local foods, take some time to Google a bit about its history and learn some cool stuff about the world around you.
And we are all for learning some cool stuff here. Thank you, Gavin, for giving us a short one for this week. And thank you all for listening along to episode 161 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike. That was Gavin and Fia. We got a big weekend coming up.
Woo!
And we'll see all of you guys in about 2 weeks for the next episode. Until then, take care, everybody.
This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Gavin Davidson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Finella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.